So I'll ask everybody to take a seat, please. Welcome, everyone. We've got a full house today. Thanks for joining us for this meeting of the Social Equity, the Mobility, and the Sustainable Communities Working Groups. My name is Paula Zamudio. I am the SANDAG staff liaison to the Social Equity Working Group, and I'm going to be chairing our meeting this morning. Before we begin, I would like to ask our interpreter to please explain how to access interpretation services.
Good morning. Announcement from an interpreter. To use interpretation feature, please go to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, row, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on the mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días. Aparte por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares en la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you. I would now like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations in the region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original people who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most of any county in the United States, from 4 distinct cultural groups, the Kumeyaay-Digueño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Kawia. This land has nourished, healed, and protected and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, if you'll please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I would like to ask our clerk, Francesca, to confirm if we have a quorum.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thanks, Francesca. Now we're going to review the meeting process for both working group members as well as members of the public who wish to participate. For working group members, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Please bear with me. I did bring my glasses, but I still might not be able to see all the name tags at the very end. Clerk, can you please provide a quick reminder on how public comments work, please?
Yes, thank you. If you're here with us in the room and you'd like to make a public comment on any item, please fill out a speaker slip in the lobby, and I will call on you by name when it's your turn to speak. If you are joining us on Zoom, please use the virtual raise hand feature. And again, I'll call on you by name when it's your turn to speak. If you're calling in on the telephone, then you will need to press *6 to unmute yourself, and *9 is how you raise your hand.
Thank you, Francesca. Now we'll move on to item number 2, which is non-agenda public comments. Per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of the items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have quorum. Based on these factors, for today's meeting, each member of the public is going to be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. Do we have any comments from members of the public, Francesca?
We do not have any public comments.
All right. Okay. Before we open it up for any working group member comments, we're going to have our CEO make a couple comments.
Hi, how are you all? And welcome. It's a great turnout. And today we're talking about the regional plan and we're almost done with it. We really appreciate all your input. It's been a great experience for the team, a great engagement process. Do everybody gets what they want to see on it? No. But it is a balanced approach, right? It's a balanced approach on what we can afford. It's a balanced approach of meeting the requirements for target emissions. And it's a balanced approach because we are taking the land use that each city has, as you have it if you're a city member. So, we really appreciate all the inputs. It's if somebody's coming with the expectation that a major change is going to happen on it, I don't think so. It's been a process, a 2-3 year process now that's coming to the final end. Can we do tweaks? Yeah, we can do tweaks with it. But I really appreciate all the engagement that everybody has had. It has made it go smoother. It's and I think it's a well-balanced plan. Again, it's a plan that changes every 4 years. So it's going to keep morphing and changing as technology, as funding, as different things come in front of us. So I do want to make that clear. It changes every 4 years. And it's based on the realities that we have in front of us and what we can forecast. So thank you, and you have a very good and robust conversation.
Thank you, Mario. Do any working group members have any non-agenda comments or announcements that they want to share with the group at this time? Okay. Now we'll keep on moving. Item number 3. The reason why we're all here, we're going to go ahead and introduce Antoinette Meyer, our Senior Director of Regional Planning. She's going to present an overview of the public comments that we received and the proposed changes to the draft 2025 regional plan.
All right, thank you, Paula, and thank you, Mario. That was a good introduction to the presentation. So the last time that we met, I think we were about to put out the draft plan, which we did in May, and that was out through the end of July for public comment. So today I'm going to highlight the themes that we heard in that public comment period, and then changes that we are proposing to make between draft and final based on things that we heard from your agencies, from our partners, from the operators, from the local jurisdictions. I know not everybody has been involved every step of the way. We started this plan back in 3 years ago. So I am going to do a little bit of a recap too on how we got to this point, because we've been working very closely with all of you, with our board members, with our social equity working group members to get feedback from the public over the last few years. So this has been a plan that's really about building consensus and being responsive to the things that we're hearing from the very diverse region that we have. But I always like to start with the rules of the game. What are the plan requirements? What do we have to do to get a plan that's approved by the federal and state government? And as I've shared with all of you in every discussion we've had about the regional plan, it's really important to have an approved regional plan, because without one, no money comes to the region for transportation, federal or state funding. And that's not just for SANDAG, that's for all of us who rely on federal and state funding for transportation and housing. We get money from the state for housing that we are not eligible for if we don't have an approved sustainable communities strategy. There are many, many, many pages of laws that we have to comply with when we put together the regional plan, but we put the big categories of requirements here on this slide. So starting at the left with some of the federal requirements, we have to comply with Title VI. That means that we do a social equity analysis and we demonstrate how the plan does not burden disadvantaged communities, how it improves access, and how we really reach out to those communities when we put together the plan to understand what their needs are and account for that in the plan. So there's an appendix of the plan that's our Title VI analysis. Air quality, that's another federal requirement that we have. We have to demonstrate how the projects in the plan won't worsen air quality or create new air quality violations. San Diego region is what's considered a non-attainment zone. That means that we don't meet federal air quality requirements. So we have to go through a very formal process to demonstrate how we won't worsen air quality in the region. And we had a little bit of a snag in recent months with air quality conformity. The federal government made a decision that invalidated the air quality model that we are required to use in California to demonstrate conformity for the plan. So essentially, there's not a tool that's approved by the federal government to use to do the air quality analysis. We think we have a solution, which is great. I cannot say definitively, though. Things are changing in real time, and there's a lot of uncertainty at this point. But we think we have a solution to get the plan approved, and we'll keep everybody updated. We sent out a memo to all of your agencies, the city managers, the board on this topic, and we'll keep doing that as we learn more. Mobility Working Group also heard about this recently because it also impacts the RTIP. We cannot do any RTIP amendments. We can't add new projects. We can't approve new projects in our budget until this conformity issue gets worked out. We understand the EPA and the ARB are close to coming up with a solution. But again, don't know how furloughs will impact that, all of that. So stay tuned. Housing and land use, those are state requirements that we have. We have to develop a sustainable community strategy, and we have to show how future growth, job growth, housing growth will happen where we have planned or existing transportation investments so that we're reducing vehicle miles traveled and providing a good housing and a good land use and transportation connection. And then the law that we talk a lot about, you've heard me say it's a really challenging law to meet, is Senate Bill 375, and that's around GHG and vehicle miles traveled. So essentially, we have to demonstrate how by 2035, we will reduce GHG by reducing vehicle miles traveled by 19% per capita. I'll say that again because that's a lot. So by 2035, 10 years, we have to demonstrate how we will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by reducing vehicle miles traveled by 19% per capita. So we don't get to take credit for zero emission vehicles and electrification. We have to meet that GHG target by reducing vehicle miles traveled. And this is really hard to do. It was a little bit easier in past plans because we had a longer time frame to do it. Now this is a 2025 plan. 2035 is 10 years away. So there's a big investment in multimodal transportation options in the early years of the plan so that we can achieve that target and get our plan approved. I will say we are working with the state on modernizing and improving SB 375. We would like to be able to get credit for all of the investments that we make in improving air quality through EV infrastructure and EV incentives, and that's not accounted for in the plan right now. And they also need to reconsider the time frame because 2035 is just too close to achieve a target like that. But we'll have more conversations with all of you on that in the coming months. Back to the regional plan. So Mario mentioned we started this plan 3 years ago, and that is true. We started with data collection. One other requirement that we have with the plan is that we base it on current data and planning assumptions. So starting in 2022, we did a lot of surveys and data collection, and we built the modeling tools that we use to really evaluate the plan and demonstrate how we're achieving the targets and meeting the goals. Then in 2023 is when we really started working with all of you and with our board. We identified goals for the plan. We understood what priorities were from our board members, and we started doing outreach to really understand what the communities around the region wanted in the plan. Then we used all of that input to put together what we called an initial concept. So this was pre-draft network. This was an initial concept. And we did that because when we put out the draft, we wanted to make sure that what we were putting out was really responsive to what we were hearing. So that initial concept allowed us to get some initial feedback and make sure that when we came back with the draft, we had really captured it. So we put that out. We did a huge round of outreach when we did that, partnering with our social equity working group organizations. And then we used that to put out a draft plan in May. We also put out an EIR in the summer. The EIR is actually still out, so you have opportunity to comment on the EIR until next week, I believe, October 13th. And then we'll take all of the last feedback that we got to make changes between draft and final, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. And we'll bring that final plan and EIR to the board for adoption in December of 2025. Hopefully they approve it, and we'll submit it to the regulatory agencies to consider for approval. I mentioned that we've been doing a lot of work with all of you and our board, and this is a snapshot of the many discussions, workshops that we've had over the last 3 years. Our board really wanted to be very involved in every step of the plan development process. They really wanted to understand it, and we took that very seriously. So we had actual workshops with them, not just meetings where we were pushing information out, but where they sat down with maps and they wrote on maps and they told us what the priorities were for all of your communities. We also wanted them to really understand the technical aspects of the plan, the requirements of the plan. And so we did a lot of presentations and workshops on that as well. And we've done workshops with you. This is the first time I think we've been able to get you all together in our office space. We usually met up in the library because we didn't have space to accommodate you. So it's nice to have a new building where we can get you all together here. We also do, you may not know this, but we do a formal tribal consultation process. And Paula is actually the tribal liaison for SANDAG and really facilitates this. But we have a tribal transportation working group. We also have a tribal task force, and that's where we do the consultation. So we worked very closely with the tribes. The tribes actually have their own version kind of a regional transportation plan. It's called the ITTS, and Interregional Transportation.
Interregional Tribal Transportation Strategy.
Thank you. And we made sure to pull what their priority projects were that were regional in nature and get them into our plan. And you'll see in a few slides here that we actually have more tribal projects in this plan than we have in any of our past plans. And I think the tribes were much more involved in the development of this plan. We did a lot of public outreach as well. This one's really focused on the outreach that we did just during that draft public comment period. So we held 7 learning sessions around the region. 6 of them were in person. We tried to hit every sub-region. And then we did a virtual one for those folks who couldn't participate in an in-person learning session. We did a lot of stakeholder group presentations. The CBOs, I want to thank you all again for all the work you did, pop-up events and hosting community events. We got wonderful feedback, the best participation I have ever seen. I've been involved in a lot of regional plans at SANDAG, and I've never seen so many people come out and provide feedback. So I really want to thank you all for the work that you did there. And then, of course, all of the traditional methods, emails, press releases, social media, and that led to over 1,300 comments. Now, again, this is just on the draft plan. We got thousands of comments leading up to the draft plan when we were doing the initial concept and the other outreach, but on the draft plan, 1,300 comments were received. Most of those came in online. The 3% came in at those learning sessions, 3% in email, and then the remainder kind of came in through the more traditional methods, either a phone call or a written letter that we received in the mail. And this summarizes the themes of the public comments that we received. So the majority of the comments we got were on transit, 47%. And that is not unusual. I think with most plans, that is the case. We hear the most about transit. Many communities asking for faster, more frequent, more convenient transit. A lot of comments about the Youth Opportunity Pass program and a desire to keep that program permanent throughout the life of the plan. And then we also heard about people wanting more amenities at transit. So things like shade and bathrooms and a better kind of user experience on transit. And then we heard much more from our rural communities. We did targeted outreach to rural communities, but we heard more from our rural communities about also wanting better transportation, public transportation, serving their communities. The second category of comments that we received was on active transportation. That was about 24% of the comments. And we heard about people wanting more and better sidewalks and bike infrastructure. We got comments on how communities wanted their bikeways designed or how they didn't want them designed. Highway and roadway was next at 19%. And there are comments on both sides of the aisle. So comments from communities that really didn't want to see highways widened. They really didn't want highways to be expanded at all in their neighborhoods. And then we hear from communities who really want congestion relief and want to see more roadway improvements. Housing and land use was the next category at 12%, people wanting to see infill and land use patterns that really enhance transit access. But we also heard concerns about recent state legislation around housing. And those of you who've been tracking it, there have been a lot of bills related to housing. So there were some concerns about the lack of local control and the state stepping in and being more involved there. Next was climate and greenhouse gas emissions. So 9% of the comments we received were really about continuing to invest in and prioritize projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and protect and preserve the environment. And then the last category, 6% were related to Title VI and disadvantaged communities and continuing to make sure that we prioritize the needs of disadvantaged communities in the plan. And I think the good thing is I feel like the plan really accomplishes these things. We have more transit in this plan than we have had in past plans. We have a very robust active transportation network that reflects all of your active transportation plans, all of your city's active transportation plans. We continue to invest in roadways, but we're really focused on managed lanes that give priority to transit, to higher occupancy vehicles. And our housing and land use patterns are consistent with all of yours. But the good news is that the growth is really happening in the places that it should be. And then we continue to have a lot of investments in climate, in our environmental mitigation and habitat and air quality improvements. And you'll see when we talk about performance measures that access for our disadvantaged communities really improves when we implement all of the projects in this plan. There were letters that we received or comments that we received from your organizations, and some of those have resulted in, well, we've been able to address all of your comments. So if you submitted a comment, I think it's fair to say that we'll be addressing those comments in the plan. And we wanted to make sure that you knew that today. But I wanted to highlight some of the larger changes. Nothing is significant. And you have an attachment in your staff report too that has the kind of details of the changes. So some of the changes were based on comments from you. Some of them were just based on updated planning that we've done. And so we know more about projects and we needed to make those changes in the plan. So first, the City of Coronado and the Navy asked that we remove the hot lane that was proposed on the Coronado Bridge due to concerns about operational issues and perhaps access issues that it might create for the naval base. So we were able to do that. The removal of the toll from SR 125 was originally in the plan before 2035 because our board had asked us to try to make that happen. But we've got more information from Caltrans on what the cost is going to be for us to return the facility to them in a state of good repair. And there's no way that we can pay off the debt for the toll road and make those improvements before 2035. So we had to push out the payoff date for the toll road to post 2035. And just a reminder, we look at two timeframes in the plan. It's not a year by year phased approach. It's what can be done between 2025 and 2035 and what can be done between 2035 and 2050. So when something's moved out to that period past 2035, it doesn't mean it's not going to be built until 2050. It just means some time within that window. There were minor freeway network changes too, like we didn't have the HOV lanes going far enough north on the I-5, so we adjusted that. And there were a couple of comments from Caltrans on I-8 where we had operational improvements, maybe not quite in the right location. So those types of corrections. Transit, we've done a lot of work on the airport transit connection this year, planning work, and the rail connection is just not feasible to fund and implement by 2035, so that was moved out. But we do have near-term bus and shuttle enhancements added so that we can make sure that we're still making better transit connections to the airport and support the new terminal in the near term. What was called the U.S.-Mexico border transit connection, also known as the cross-border trolley, was moved to what we call the unconstrained network. What is the unconstrained network? Those are the projects that we don't have an identified funding source for or that can't be feasibly built within the life of the plan, so after 2050. So we have this kind of wish list of projects that we keep so that we don't lose sight of them and we can demonstrate that they're still projects of interest, but they're not feasible to construct within the life of the plan. So that one was moved to the unconstrained network. And then we heard from NCTD and MTS about some changes that they wanted to see to various routes in the plan. Again, nothing major, and we made those. And then, of course, the costs and revenues had to be updated based on those changes. And we were able to respond to a request from our transportation committee, which was to try to reduce the sales tax burden. And we were able to go from 2 half-cent sales tax in the plan down to 1 3/4 cent regional sales tax that's moved out to later in the plan. So those are the major changes that are proposed between draft and final. And, you know, the network really doesn't look much different because the projects didn't really change all of that much. I think some of you requested that we adjust flexible fleet service areas, which we did. But other than that, the projects in the plan really kind of remain whole. So we still have a very robust and comprehensive network of transit. We have our 36 neighborhood shuttle service areas. We have that complete network of managed lanes, safety and operational improvements in all of our rural state routes. And then you don't see the active transportation network lines on this map because it would just be far too many lines. But our active transportation network represents all of your active transportation plans. And then I mentioned we have more rural and tribal projects in this plan. So that's really focused on safety and operational improvements on the state routes. And we also, you know, heard from our communities there that they wanted better transit service. So all of the existing transit has been upgraded to provide daily service and not just one trip per day, but multiple trips throughout the day. And we have some new lines as well. And we're going to try some shuttle services in some of our rural villages as well. Nothing changed with the land use pattern. It reflects all of your land use plans and it meets our requirements. Most of our growth is happening in those areas where we have existing and future transit. Early on, we had a workshop that some of you participated in, if you were around back then, where we came up with goals and you gave us input on what the performance measures should be for those goals. So those goals were adopted by our board and were really about having a convenient and equitable, a healthy and safe transportation system and communities. We've done all of the modeling of the performance measures. There was an appendix in the plan that has all of that information, but it demonstrates that we're achieving the goals if we implement the projects in the plan. Travel times are reduced for all modes in almost every corridor, and that includes commercial vehicles as well as passenger vehicles and transit. There's increased access to basic needs, medical, education, jobs for communities. There's our healthier communities, so air quality is better. We meet our 19% greenhouse gas target, which is huge. We're just over that, and so that's really good news. But also transportation related physical activity goes up. So more people are getting more of their physical activity from walking or biking to work or major destinations. And that's probably because there's a lot more safe active transportation infrastructure in this plan and people feel more comfortable making trips that way. So the cost of the plan is, happy to say, less than any plan over the last at least decade, maybe a little bit longer. It's 125 billion. And I want to remind everybody that this is not just the new projects in the plan. This is operating and maintaining everything that exists today and everything that will be operating and maintaining in the future. It also includes all of the money that we pass through to all of you for local streets and roads and through our grant programs. It includes paying off our debt where we've, have it. So it's really all of the costs associated with everything in the plan: projects, policies, programs, operations, and maintenance, and money that we pass through. So Mario mentioned we're basically almost done. We're at the finish line here. I'm going to take a really long nap. December 13th, I guess December 12th is when we're planning to take it to our board and ask them to adopt the plan and the EIR. But just again, a reminder, the EIR is still out for public comment. You have until October 13th to do that. And so I've been talking for far too long, and I want to turn it back to our chair, Paula, so that she can open it up for your questions and comments after we hear from any members of the public who might be wanting to comment.
Thank you, Antoinette. It's going to be a very well-deserved nap. Do we have any comments from members of the public, Francesca?
Thank you, Paula. We do not.
Did you say we do? We do?
I'm sorry, we do not have any
Oh,
public.
I thought you said we do. Okay, so now we'll open it up to working group members. Questions, comments for Antoinette? I know there's a lot of people in the room, but don't be shy. Really?
Wow. Not used for this group. I'm not used to this group being so quiet.
Okay.
Any doubts about the changes?
Claire's got a comment.
Thank you for the presentation. It's exciting to see this come to the next phase. I have a comment or a question that I don't think is necessarily going to be fixed with this, but I think it's something to be considering in future plans and as we're thinking about social equity and access. One of the parts of the plan mentioned consistency with local land use and zoning. And so I'm thinking about neighborhoods that have, history of being redlined and where there's maybe zoning that's not compatible with the health and safety of residents. And that obviously takes jurisdictions, changing their zoning and many, many things to happen in order to get there. But I'm just thinking about, as with equity being part of our our collective goals, is like how can we grapple with that collectively as we continue to move forward with future regional plans so that we can maybe address some of those systemic issues. So I don't know that we have answers, but just to throw that out there.
So just a reminder that zoning happens at the local level. So we don't do zoning or look at zoning in the regional plan. We just assume what local jurisdictions have in their general plans. So those decisions are made at the local level.
I think another piece looking forward for the future plans, it's going to be thinking about the innovative financing piece. And right now, the projections of financing were done based on the traditional funding pieces. But as we're moving in a new world, which I don't know if it will be successful or not, more partnerships with nonprofits, philanthropies, and private-public partnerships, as well as understanding a little bit more what a managed lane system in operation would do and generate. I think it's going to be one of the future challenges in the 2029 plan of trying to understand that, as well as the local entities on the housing developments and those partnerships on housing developments. It's still a very huge gray area, but I think that for the 2029, we do need to put our innovative thinking caps of how we can make the pie bigger and with the traditional revenue assumptions, but also being really innovative partnerships without waiving the roles and responsibilities and the management and supervision of local governments. So I think that that's a place that it's going to be exciting to pursue. And it's just the name of the game, as well as understanding how the transit agencies are dealing with technology. How are we dealing with the financial challenges they're having with riderships, and also the microtransit, what is happening with microtransit. So I think that the horizon for the 2029 plan, once we finish this one and Antoinette takes her break and her team, I think we'll immediately start having those conversations of data gathering, but also having those discussions that we do need to have to figure all this up for the future.
I'm glad Mario mentioned the 2029 plan because you might be thinking like, oh, we'll start on that in a couple of years. Au contraire. In about 6 months after we approve this plan is when we'll start really kind of laying out the scope and the schedule and identifying our data needs and all of that good stuff for the 2029 plan. So you all get, a 6 to 9 month break, and then I'll be back here again, looking for your feedback, input, and participation in the 2029 plan.
Now that folks have had some time. Yep, Patrick?
Good morning, Patrick Monedo with City Chula Vista. So one of the significant changes from the previous draft was that the SR 125 toll removal was going to be pushed out an additional 5 years. I think that would be a pretty big concern for our city leaders. And so I know you had mentioned that Caltrans had did a financial analysis identifying some additional infrastructure needs prior to taking over maintenance of the freeway. But I'm not going to ask for those more information about that here. I'll be reaching out to you to after this meeting to get additional information so I can share that with our local leaders.
Yes, and we've already updated our board on this and our policy advisory committee meeting. So your deputy mayor is aware of this change in the plan. And we're going to be having a larger presentation to the board, probably January or February, bringing Caltrans to kind of present the state of good repair analysis that they've done. And so I want to also just be clear that just because we've moved it out in the plan, if we are able to get funding or we negotiate those costs down, that doesn't mean we can't pay it off earlier and take the toll off. We're not restricted from doing things in different timeframes in the plan, but right now we don't have a viable funding source to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat that one to death, but I think it's important to highlight. Look, just the debt itself can potentially be repaid by the first call, I think is
2029.
2029, let's say 2030, right? But then the state of good repair, it's between 100 right now or $140 million. With the revenues that we see, 20-30 million, and then take the haircut of operations and this and that, it doesn't pencil out with the information that we have. And the responsibility Antoinette and her team has, as well as me, is that we have to be fully transparent with the information we have in front of us. But we are committed to keep looking into this and bring it. The board has mandated us to figure it out on as early as possible. So we're working on that. And like she said, this doesn't preclude to happen. And remember, there's a 2029 plan that even in the best case scenario, that is the earliest, or 2030, that it could be paid for. So I wouldn't stress a lot about it. I think we'll figure a way, and we'll continue conversing with Caltrans. Another piece that it's important is to highlight is Caltrans, the department, has 5 and 10 years maintenance plans and staffing plans. They don't have in their staffing plan this facility because their assumption is that we're paying for the maintenance and operations. So by changing that 100% on them, they go, well, this is what we need. We don't have in our 5-10 year plan. So there's a lot of discussions still to be had. And then also discussions about managed lanes and also an education piece. And this is important, I think, for all of us is, look, the reality is that once you take the tolls off that facility, you're going to degrade the level of service, and the connections on that facility to the 54 and the 54 to the 805 cannot take the volumes that we're going to be pumping. So, it's going to be very popular from a point, but 60 days after, it's going to be very unpopular when people start seeing the degradation. So I think it's our responsibility to really have a well-robust plan that will really help the public both reducing the cost, the burden that they have, but also making sure that the system doesn't collapse. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I had seen another hand. Is that Darlene?
Yes, thank you. Darlene Akonjo with the City of Oceanside. Thank you, Antoinette, for all your hard work and really appreciate the presentation. I had a question about kind of local funding for things like we have a Go Side shuttle. It's a little mini shuttle that goes around our downtown, and it helps a lot with first mile, last mile. We were fortunate enough to get a grant opportunity for the program as a pilot. But now we're having serious trouble continuing to fund this very popular resource for our downtown. As you're talking about the cost of the regional plan, are there going to be more opportunities for grant projects?
So SANDAG doesn't currently have a funding source that allows us to pay for the ongoing operations of those types of shuttle services. And we've had some conversations about that. Right now, the federal funding that we're using can be used for pilot projects only and can't be used to fund the ongoing operations. There isn't really a good funding source in the region today for that. I think local streets and roads transit money could be used, but I know you all rely on that funding for other things as well. I know MTS, not going to benefit you necessarily, is planning a ballot measure. Perhaps that's a new source of funding that could be used to operate those services in the future. But that is something that is going to be kind of challenging, is to the ongoing operations, and something we're going to have a lot of conversations about, with our board. We're looking for funding all of the time and creative solutions. But today, local sources like parking revenues or other, types of sources that don't have all the federal strings attached are probably the best bet.
And that's what I was referring to, really putting our thinking caps on, because it's very popular. But once the pilots are moving, there's not a sustainable funding source. And we need to have a very broad conversation as a region of how do we deal with microtransit. And I think that's what I was saying, that the beginning discussions of the 2029 plan are going to actually be a good table to start having those discussions, and then even send them to appropriate committees or whatever, that the elected officials can make policy decisions on it. But it's a complex situation based on the rules and regulations that we have right now, the fiscal cliff that the transit agencies have. We have to figure out, one, do we want to keep pursuing it? Two, is it going to continue being free? Or how are we going to partner with the private sector? And when the private sector, if it's philanthropy, okay, but it's not perpetual. Or if we're going to look at a longer term model, where is the equity, right? Where those are very tough conversations that I think in the next coming months or early next year, we should begin those conversations, not be afraid of them. Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts? Oh, yep.
Hi, Nathan Schmidt, City of Carlsbad. So just on the topic, I guess, looking forward to the next round, just a few suggestions for that. So as we review this plan, we work closely with our council members, try to explain the plan to them. I think what is missing kind of from the previous versions that I would like to see in future versions is just more detail at the local level, be it sub-regional, agency level, just so we can understand and explain to our decision makers the benefits, the trade-offs that we're considering, because right now we just don't see that. It's more presented at the regional level in terms of the performance measures. So that additional detail in terms of, what we're seeing in terms of ridership, the VMT at a local level would be very helpful. I think from the prior board meeting last week, you got a good picture of the City of Carlsbad's comments from our council member, but just using that as an example, when we have rapid routes on Palomar Airport Road, El Camino Real, which are currently very low performing routes, low performing in terms of ridership. And the fact is there's just not the land use to support it. So when we see things like that, it's just very difficult for us to explain that to our council members because of that lack of kind of local data or the data narrative, some type of description that can help us kind of paint the picture of how this is benefiting our local communities.
Well,
And
Nathan-
again, just in terms of microtransit, we've been, really supportive of that as well. So we look forward to those discussions and how we can expand that throughout the region. Thank you.
Nathan, we can have more conversations about what would be helpful to you at the local level, but it is a regional plan and we don't do local level modeling. We're required to do regional level modeling and show how the transportation system performs as a system at the regional level. So we're probably not going to get to the level of detail that you like. That just doesn't happen at the regional plan scale. And we also don't necessarily have the tools, the resources to be able to do that level of analysis. So I'm sure there are things though that we can do to help you communicate what's in the plan and how it's working for your communities, and the same for the rest of you. But just a reminder, this is not a sub-regional plan. It's not local level plan. It's a regional plan.
Sure, fully understand that. We're just looking for some additional data, be it data, description, something just to help explain that better to our decision makers.
Any other hands?
I'm sorry, I have one more question. Maybe this was about 15, 20 years ago. There was a pilot project with a ferry that went from Oceanside to downtown. And I don't think that it went well, which is why we don't have one today. But as you're thinking about regional planning, are you thinking about water transit?
So we don't have ferries in the regional plan. It is something that we've considered. The problem is funding and an operator for ferries. So perhaps that's something we could do a little bit more study on to determine the viability, to determine the likelihood of that happening in the region. But you don't see it in the plan just because right now there's nobody who's stepped up to say they're going to operate it. The ferries that we have are privately operated in the region, maybe with some public subsidy, but primarily privately operated. And we haven't heard that either of the transit operators is interested in taking on ferries.
Also, Merit came out with M5, which was kind of a parallel route to the I-5 for goods movement across the coast. It looks great, but again, there's not a lot of takers on it. So I think that's also an area that it is functioning, right? But we'll have to figure out, like Antoinette said, if it really pencils out, or is it something really ambitious, right, that we're taking to the next level. Yeah, but it's a great idea. I worked on that original ferry many years ago.
Hi,
Leanne?
good morning, Lillian Doherty, North County Transit, San Diego Railroad. Oh, sorry. A few regional plans ago, there was an Appendix U identifying and prioritizing grade crossings. That particular appendix was very helpful for us in seeking grant funding, particularly supporting our local communities when they are seeking funds with that respect. Maybe the place is not the regional plan, but to the extent that SANDAG can support another prioritized list would be really helpful.
Yes, we are kicking that off. So we have a pot of money for grade separations in the plan, but we don't have that prioritized list in the plan because it's due for a refresh. So we'll be working with you and MTS over the course of this year to determine how to do that evaluation and have that revisit that list and incorporate it in the 2029 plan.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mhm.
Once, twice. Okay.
All right, well, thank you guys for making the trek to SANDAG and for listening to my spiel and for being active participants in the development of this plan. We'll keep you all posted on next steps.
Thank you. We're adjourned.